My name is Jessie Hustis. If you know the last name, my dad is David. So I've pretty much been OpenNMS adjacent for as long as he's been involved with the project, so that's a pretty long time. I started working for the OpenNMS group formally back in March, and I was doing some contract work off and on for the last few years. I'm a graphic designer, so I work on trying to make all of our logos and graphics consistent through all of the things that we do. And it's not really something that we've ever attempted before, so it's a pretty big undertaking. So far, I've pretty much been doing it how I think it works. And part of what I'd like to talk about today is get some feedback from you guys about how we're doing and what you think. So I'm going to talk to you today about branding. Branding is an application of design. So I wanted to share this quote from Georgia O'Keeffe. She says, "I found I could say things with color and shapes that I couldn't say in any other way, things that I had no words for." So design allows you to communicate very instantaneously by showing rather than telling things. We could write an entire paragraph to tell you that OpenNMS is a professional enterprise-grade software, or we could make it look that way and you immediately assume it. So design is, my favorite definition is the rendering of intent. You can design software, you can design a picture, you can design a building, but there's always a reason and there's an intention rather than something that's free form that might be more artistic. So branding is a combination of design and marketing. So we have an intent that we want to communicate, and then specifically about a company to a group of people. And so I was just going to very briefly go over some of the elements of branding. The most obvious one that everyone knows about is a logo. We see tens of thousands of logos throughout our weeks. Very good ones tend to be symbolic. They represent something about the company that owns it. They're recognizable. Immediately you know what company they are, and they should be distinct. So having a ton of logos that look the same doesn't really help you very much. Does anybody know what these logos are? Anybody? This one. What do you guys think about the new Google logo? Do you like it? Not like it?
Works.
Works? Yeah. And then do you know this one? This one is Double Robotics. It's our little robot we've got running around. And Taurus really likes it because it's the D and it also looks like the robot. So that's an example of a very successful logo. Maybe it'll become more recognizable when they get bigger. And then the second type of logo that maybe people see all the time but don't necessarily know what it's called is a logotype, or sometimes it's called a type mark. It's the name of the company generally and some type of stylized text. And it can include the logo, so Fedora has included their infinity F. Google doesn't include anything because their logo is the G. And then Double Robotics has their logo right there. A lot of times they will choose a typeface and customize it specifically for their logotype so that you don't just type in Red Hat or something into your Word editor and it looks exactly the same. Interestingly, I'll get to that in a second. So here we go, Fedora. And then a lot of times companies will choose specific typefaces for their marketing collateral. So we'll choose more than one font generally, sometimes even 3 or 4 fonts for different purposes. You almost always choose a different font for the heading of paragraphs or slides like mine. in the body. Incidentally, I'm using our corporate fonts that I've chosen. And you generally want to make them complementary to your logo or your logotype. That way everything looks cohesive and you can use all of the elements together, which is the point of doing brand all together that way. So the Fedora logotype, the Fedora project has chosen this logotype, and they have chosen the Comforta font and Cantarell. They use Comforta as their heading font and Cantarell as their body text. They are both sans serif fonts, which means that neither one of them have the little lines at the bottom like that. And that's a little unusual. A lot of times graphic designers like to show contrast by changing a sans serif font with a serif font. And they tend to also need to work together, which font matching is very much a feeling kind of thing. There's not really a science to it. I personally don't really like this combination, but I like to have fonts kind of change weights. So if I want to do a heading font, I want it to be either heavier or lighter than my body text so that it looks very different and obvious that they're two different things. I was reading on the Fedora wiki that the Comforta font is the closest that they could come to the Fedora logo mark, but the original logo mark was not done in an open source font, so they can't legally distribute the Fedora logo mark as a text or with an image file with text in it, so they've converted it just to an image. So that's kind of an interesting twist on it that a lot of companies wouldn't necessarily see. And then a lot of times companies will also choose a color palette. The color palette generally is represented in the logo, but not only in the logo, but in the design elements as well. So again, I've borrowed the Fedora Projects one. I think they've been really successful with it. You can see on this chart, they've done display colors and print colors. So display colors are RGB and hex codes that we all know and love. And then print colors have cyan, magenta, yellow, and K, which stands for black. And it's the percentages are all the amounts of ink that go on different plates. Well, traditionally plates, now it's digital, so it's a mixture of ink. And both of those look very different when you're working on a piece of collateral. So I would only use the display colors for something that's never going to be printed. If you take an RGB file to a printer and ask them to print it for you, they'll probably smack you because it will look terrible. For instance, our green turns very muddy if you try and use a CMYK color on a display, or when you use the RGB code on a print, it turns kind of like neon green. It's really strange. So, oh, also they have their Pantone color. Pantone is, they've managed to make proprietary colors. No. It's, it's fine. Don't worry about it. So they sell pre-mixed inks that you can associate with your brand. So Fedora, probably back when they did the logotype, chose Pantone 2395 as their light blue and 541 as their dark blue, which means they could go to a printer and say, use this ink specifically in these specific places. In my opinion, I found out the hard way that going that route, one, is very stupid because you're stuck with one color, and two, is very expensive because you have to pay the copyright holder for their ink. So the other part of a color palette that's important is you typically will have a couple of main colors and then kind of highlight colors. So Fedora's been really cute and named all of their fonts things like Friends Magenta and Features Orange. And I ideally, you can take all of these colors, throw them in a box, mix them up, and pour them out, and they'll all still pretty much match. That way, somebody like me, as a graphic designer, can hand it to, say, a developer, and you need a link color, pick any of these. All of them will work. Additionally, it's good to choose specific blacks and grays to use as accent colors. That way everybody's got the same gray, everybody's got the same type of black. Interestingly, about black in RGB, it doesn't really matter. We all know it's 000. But when you get into CMYK, there are different varieties of black. We call it rich black. And you use different mixes of inks for different situations. So when you're doing a lot of type, say you're printing a book, you're going to use a different mix of black, because the way a lot of non-digital print presses work is they line up plates with the different colors of ink on them. And if each plate has 100% of each ink to make black, they squish together and then kind of make it blurry. And that's not so good for reading. So you might choose a very specific mixture, trying to lower all of the ink content on each plate. Are you going to help? Yeah. And then sometimes you want a really, really, really dark color, so you want to load up those plates, and you go ahead and just max out everything. And then graphics. They're just different visual elements that somebody has created that really tie everything together. And for an example, I've kind of chosen this networking diagram thing in our collateral for now, anyway. And different brands will often change these things pretty frequently, but I'll show you in a moment a really good example. And a style guide. And style guides are basically documents that put all of these elements together. So it tells you what you can do with the logo, what you can't do with the logo. Sometimes it can be very nitpicky. Sometimes they're more loose, more relaxed. Give people some general rules, what the colors are, how maybe there are colors that you shouldn't ever put together, and usually some kind of relative sizing. So you always want the logo to be half of maybe a very large logo or something, if you're doing a smaller one and a larger one. And what's kind of fun is that these guides can be little design projects in themselves. And I'm going to show you an example of SKYPE's brand book. They're pretty famous in the community for doing really fun brand books, and I think this is the most recent one. Oh no. There we go. So here they have they've stated what their logo is, and they've used their own style guide in making the style guide, so it's kind of recursive. And they're pretty well known for being very casual with their style guides, and I think that's really fun, maybe something that we could explore. So they have two different logos, one for print, one for online. Printed material tends to be a little bit simpler so that it doesn't get so confusing, and it's a little bit easier to print. And then online material, they have one that's a little bit more detailed. And they're probably in two different colors as well. So this is probably in CMYK, and this is probably in RGB. Here they've also had a very straightforward explanation of what is a good idea and what is not a good idea to do with their logo. So normally, the inside of the cloud is white, the logotype here, and then the outside is blue. But they've said it's okay to swap the colors if you need to have a blue background. And it's also okay to swap the colors if you're going to place it on top of a photograph. It's a lot easier to work with a logo if it's one or two colors. That way you can have these variations and it works in a whole lot of different settings. Imagine trying to embroider this logo on a shirt. That would not be the most fun thing. And then here they've done a very general, please don't do this. You can't read it. Probably make sure that you could use the inverted version of the logo if you needed to use a cream background. And don't use a really cluttered picture behind our logo. And these rules are very important to protect the professionalism of a brand. And as far as style guides go, SKYPE is very, very chill. A lot of times there will be very specific measurements you need to have between placing the logo at the edge of the paper or so, or the display. So you say you need to have 1 E of space around the entire logo. But they just say don't put it at the edge. It's pretty much common sense. This is how they have chosen to display their colors. So they have SKYPE blue, SKYPE green, purple, yellow, and orange. And again, each one does have their own Pantone color. I imagine SKYPE probably has the budget to print whatever they want. And they've done their CMYK mixes, their RGB mixes, and their hex codes. I'm sure most of you know hex codes are simply a translation of RGB values. It's really helpful for us when we're working in InDesign and just copy a 6-letter code instead of having to type into 3 different input boxes. And again, all these colors pretty much go together. You could put the green and the orange or green and the yellow together and it would look fine. And so then they go over their typefaces, and they have, they've done it a little bit differently. They don't have necessarily a heading and a body font, which they might use it for that, but I don't think they do. This is kind of what they use for their corporate text that you really need to read and understand. And then they've chosen Akbar for their advertising materials. And then they've kind of taken it a step further with their style guide. So they talk about who are their users. And that's a very important, obviously, part of marketing, to know who is using your product. And they do this so that when you're using these branding elements, you can keep this in mind. So they've got this kid, and he plays video games and uses Skype for his voice client. And so they want to really keep it informal. So designing logos can be really, really hard. Getting branding right can be very challenging. It's a lot of different elements to weave together. And it's really easy to get it wrong. So I was going to show you some of the most egregious examples of getting it wrong, because it's a lot more fun than showing you ones I got it right. Do you guys know what this one is? Anybody?
Olympics 2012?
Yes. Does anybody know why this is not a successful logo? Want to volunteer? If you want to volunteer, you can get a free flash drive. It has Meridian and Horizon, and conveniently fits in your wallet. It's a business card size. I'm going to bribe you to participate. So,
Just hard to read.
hard to read. Yes.
Obviously, it looks like Lisa Simpson playing the saxophone. It's not specifically them. I mean, they've got the Olympic rings in it, but it's, yeah.
Yeah. Well, you're English. Does it represent anything about London to you?
No.
No.
Just ugly.
It is. It's terrible. It's kind of the classic example of terrible logo design. And then we're in Europe, so I don't know if you guys know about JCPenney. It's a department store in America. And a few years ago, they tried to do a rebranding project, and they came up with this logo as their final. It's kind of an inexpensive discount store. And everyone just completely lost their minds when they came out with this, because it's very, very simple. It looks like you're advertising America, and everybody already knows about America.
Looks a bit like
It does, yeah. So this was pretty famously a flop. The Verizon logo is awful. Any ideas as to?
Use of alpha in the logo?
Yes, absolutely. Anybody else have a problem with it?
Lots of empty space?
Yeah. So another thing about it is angry. I'm usually angry about it. So imagine you have to put this in a website where the name is just this big. It's very long but very narrow. You could probably put that in a menu bar. But now if you have to incorporate this large V, your menu bar goes from something this big to something this big for probably not a very good reason, and where it automatically takes up space that you could be using for other things. And yes, absolutely, the use of alpha is terrible. Again, how would you embroider that onto a shirt?
Oh. They sell 3D glasses.
So everybody had a pretty strong reaction. Any thoughts?
Unreadable.
It is, absolutely, totally unreadable.
Actually, I can read it without glasses on.
Do you know what it says?
I think you will need those 3D glasses for reading that.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
can't look at this for more than 30 seconds
Exactly.
without using them.
That's probably the opposite of what you want people thinking about your brand. What do you think there's anything they could have done to improve it, or
One color?
one color?
Maybe two?
Don't use it.
So, incidentally, when I was talking before about the plates of the CMYK printing machines, this is exactly what happens when it's not calibrated. So you have the cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. I think somebody just made a mistake and thought it looked cool. So now we're going to talk about OpenNMS, which you guys are here for that, so that's a lot more exciting. And like I said, I've been kind of OpenNMS adjacent for about half of my life. So I've seen a lot of changes and things. Obviously, I don't use the software, so I just see the website and the logo and stuff like that. So we're going to travel back in time to the year 2000. And I use the archive.org cache to pull some images of the opennms.com or .org websites, depending on what they had the better cache of. So this is the website from 2000. It looks very 2000. And this actually predates Taurus's official involvement, I think. However, Ben was still there. Ben Reed is listed on the website. So there's not really anything too bad. We have green. In 2001, we finally have a logo. Maybe we did back then, but it's not on there. And obviously, you see the OpenNMS logo is pretty similar to the one it is now, except for the circle is filled in. This is what the user interface looked like. It was a little Java thing. And then this was the website. It was only about that long. Some pages a bit longer than others. And I think there was a problem. Rendering the GIF, so it blue on purpose? I'm not entirely certain, but it's blue now. It's not really anything terrible about that. It gets the job done. And then we move into the web console about the same era, I think. It's really similar to what it is now. Do you guys see any differences that really jump out at you, or?
Bolder colors.
Yeah.
More colors.
Definitely bolder colors. So that's 2001. That's 14 years ago. And then a few years later, I think this is about 2003 or so, we added color to the website, which is awesome. And we have a little bit of a graphic element over here. I think this is the .org page, I think. No, this is the .com because there's a login. And so they incorporated green, which is still our signature color, especially for Horizon. It's not really a standard green, but you get the idea. And then tag appears, the OpenNMS group. So this is the .com page, definitely. And we have a new logo, the OpenNMS group, and a darker green on the menu over there. And I actually really like this page. I think we should go back to it. And so really the colors here are green, white, and black with just a console display font. Nobody's really chosen anything. And I think about this time the interface evolved a little bit. I think we had somebody do a UI overhaul, right? Okay, cool. And so now we have, I think the greens actually match, which is awesome. This is, you can see on the screenshot, 2007. The year I did my internship with OpenNMS, incidentally. And there's a bit of a gradient on the status bars there, and a bit of a gradient on the headings. Looks pretty nice. And then another iteration of the website. We've incorporated orange. I don't think that's an archive.org thing, which is very nice because orange is on the opposite end of green, so they're very good contrasting colors. And another iteration of the website, it's gone from white to black. We've moved to the black, green, white color scheme that we had for a really long time. And the logo changed. We had the new logo, which I think Ben did, possibly. No, I think Ben just put group under OpenNMS. Yeah. And then someone designed the swoosh logo that we still use and love today. And this is our website, or was our website from about 2010 to 2015. I don't know that there were too many changes in the design along those times. But there's, you know, a little bit more sophisticated graphics there. And where are we now? So this is what I've been working on for the last year or so. You know, really trying to create a branding package for OpenNMS. And again, it's never really something we've concentrated on before, so I really wanted to just dive into it. And I've made a couple of mistakes along the way that I've learned from, and maybe you guys can give me some feedback about what you think. I'll probably let you know, I will let you know in a few minutes where I think that we're going. So, logo, we don't really have a specific logo without the logotype because our logo says OpenNMS in it. We kind of use this favicon that is the OpenNMS O with the green swoosh on top of it, which works fine. If you use our website, it goes up in the corner. And then we haven't talked at all about Compass, which is our new mobile app. And I designed this logo to kind of incorporate Meridian and Horizon branding together. And then the little compass thing in the middle is the exact middle RGB codes between the two colors. So really what we have are logotypes. So we, this past year, decided to differentiate our products into Horizon and Meridian, which I think most of you guys know about. We're following the Red Hat model. And so the Horizon we decided to keep with the green color because that's really where our roots are. And we want to make sure that everybody knows that this is always going to be open source. Green really represents the community where we've come from. And and where we're going, so we wanted to keep Horizon with that identity. And then Meridian, we chose to use blue. I think green and blue were our colors again at some point. It's new. Blue is kind of a color that's more corporate. If you look into the color studies, blue tends to be the choice of a lot of politicians because it represents trust and stability and all those good things. We want people to trust us. And then brand new Compass logo. Probably I would change a few things. I designed all three of these. And the swooshes are slightly significant. So Horizon is kind of horizontal. Meridian is vertical, like a meridian line. And then Compass is kind of a circle that's tilted on its side. But, we really didn't have a lot of time to talk about the process of design and what these things mean. So they work, we have them now, but we're certainly open to revising them in the future.
Question?
Yes?
The reason for OpenNMS at Compass is smaller than the other two OpenNMS.
I think it's an old file. Yes, I think this is actually an outdated file. I think I made it slightly larger. That's a good question. It should be the same size. You're correct. And then we've chosen a color palette. We have no Compass color palette yet. But we basically just have the main colors here, and Horizon green, Meridian blue. We've been very creative with our names. And just some highlight colors that we don't really use very often that do, in theory, go together. So again, we haven't spent a whole lot of energy so far doing this. They're the same exact colors, but with green as the primary color here, and with blue as the primary color here. And then we have one gray accent color that's all the same. And I've chosen a couple of typefaces. They are proprietary typefaces because I didn't know any better. And probably we will change them to be open typefaces. I've learned in the last year that using proprietary typefaces is, one, not awesome because I have to pay a lot of money for them, and two, because it's very difficult for me to distribute them. I work in the Adobe suite, so I get these typefaces for free because I have a cloud subscription. But if I need to send, say, a PowerPoint template to Jeff, he probably doesn't have these fonts, and it can be very difficult to try and find things that are similar, and it's not good to have everything very different. Because as a small company, everybody kind of works on things themselves as opposed to having at one department pump out all of the art. But I've chosen a heavy sans serif font for the heading font, Futura PT Heavy. I like it a lot because it's designed very well for print and for display. It's very clear. And our headings, I chose that they would always be capital letters. Another slight misstep on my part was that OpenNMS in all caps looks a little strange and hard to read. So probably in the future, we're going to change that. And then I chose Musea Slab. It's a serif font that has a little doohickeys right there. As the body font, I like serif fonts for body text. I think it's a little easier to read. And it provides some more diversity on the page than just having two sans serif fonts. I keep running into that. And then you can see we've applied the new logo to the Horizon interface here. And some of the colors have been standardized to the new palette. So we have a very slightly new green. I can tell very easily because I see it all the time. I don't know if it was abundantly obvious. But where you can really see the new palette is in the Meridian interface. This is the new Meridian blue. This is, I think it's it is the standard gray with a couple of different variations to make it lighter or darker. And it's more flat, which is, I guess, trendier now. And that's the direction we've gone with that. And then Compass's interface, Compass has two interfaces. There's one Horizon and one for Meridian. Meridian turns blue. It's very lovely. And Ben has designed this keeping our palette in mind. Again, probably it would be easier to choose a font that's more readily available because we have not been able to incorporate our fonts into any of our interfaces. So now I want to talk about what we're going to do next. We've gone from where we were to where we are and what we're going to do in the future. So branding Meridian and Horizon, trying to better express what those things mean, what they mean to you, what they mean to us, and differentiating them maybe a little bit more in their branding because they're very different products and for very different people. And representing what we need to tell you guys and what you guys feel about what we've created. And that's OUCE. Does everybody know OUCE? No? Some people know OUCE. OUCE is our Kiwi, and he's awesome. And we're trying to maybe create more of a mascot with him and use him in a lot more of our advertising. Something I look forward to doing with a lot of the Horizon branding and design is something called Open Design. And Mozilla is pretty famous for doing this. They show their process and their ideas for coming up with a logo, because even though logos are very simple, generally there's a lot of work that's behind there. And it's very easy to go on Behance or Dribbble and look at all these beautiful things that people have made and feel like they just fall out of the sky. But there's really a lot of work behind them. And it's a little terrifying to publish your process because there's a lot of exploration involved and people can be very, very critical. So sometimes if you're still experimenting and people are critiquing as you're experimenting, it's not always helpful. But it's also helpful for, I think, the community to see your thought process and get feedback along the way. Because when you're designing something like Firefox or Horizon, it's not about one person, it's not about one company, it's about the entire community and user base. And I wanted to talk about using open fonts just philosophically. It's a better idea, and it's a better idea for just day-to-day operations as well. So that's it. That's kind of where we're going. And again, this is not something we've really done before. So I'd like to, if you guys have any ideas about it, or you can come talk to me, or we can talk about it now. If you say things, I can give you presents. So what do you think? What do you think of, we've kind of taken it from where we were just a year ago to something very different now. You like it?
Now looking back to the last 5 years, I think it's beginning of last 5 years, so it was more or less no movement, and around the last 10 to 15 months there around, I see it's more dynamically don't know how I should say. I think it's good.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you, what, do you see more movement in the software as well, or?
All over the whole project,
Mm-hmm.
including the marketing or the branding.
Mm-hmm. Cool, awesome. So would you be interested in maybe some kind of collaborative forum talking about this kind of stuff, or?
Why not?
Yeah, cool, cool. So the logo now, do you guys feel really like an emotional attachment to it? It's been around for a really long time. How do you respond to how it looks today?
I wouldn't change it.
You would change it?
I wouldn't.
Oh, you wouldn't?
Something actually confused me slightly is you have the Meridian and Horizon and Compass logos with the OpenNMS with the outlined, Open is written in an outlined font,
Yes.
whereas the one in the top right
Mm-hmm.
is in solid green.
Yes.
Is there a reason for the actual difference between them, or is it mainly just that's the branding for the OpenNMS group versus the software?
Very
Is that
good.
going to
You may
integrate?
want to repeat the question.
Okay, very good idea. Very good detail, observation. So his question was, in these logos, OpenNMS is written in an outline font, whereas at the top of this slide, it's written in a solid lettering. Very, very good observation. That's a little sneaky thing I did. So one issue with this traditional logo is that it's 3 colors. So we have green, white, and black. And it's very, very difficult to place a logo of 3 colors on just about anything that's not white or very light color. So you can even see sometimes with our shirts, we've had to make alterations. Like my NMS right here is gray. And on Jeff's pale green shirt, we can keep the original styling. So sometimes, oh wait, it's back here. When I need to place the logo, I have used a simplified version, and I've kind of evolved into using it more often than not because it's a little bit more updated. And quite simply, these were designed before I started doing that. Probably if I were to go back and change them, I would make them all the same flat design. So yes, absolutely, you're right.
Is the logo guide, the style guide, published anywhere?
It's very much a work in progress. I have one, but again, it's a little bit outdated. I was using this logo more often than not with the outline font, and finding it very difficult at any point I had to make something not on a white background or a light gray background. So the constraints imposed by the logo were so high that it was easier to just change things. And especially working with the OpenNMS group branding stuff, sometimes our workload is so high that getting approval for exactly what we're going to do can take a really long time, months. So a lot of things,
Maybe you get to remove OpenNMS.
probably, yeah, just,
Would be nice, Horizon, MERIDIAN, big brands.
so you're saying it would be good to just have Horizon without OpenNMS?
Maybe now, but MERIDIan, Compass.
Mm-hmm. Any thoughts on that idea?
These terms are good as sub-products, but I don't think they will be a good marketing term because there are a lot of different things called Horizon,
Yeah,
even in the software world. So
it is a pretty,
yeah.
I think you should not use OpenNMS.
Okay.
This is the Horizon project.
Yes.
Stage.
yeah. I know at least OpenStack has a thing called Horizon, who else does? At least one other open source project has a thing called Horizon. And also OpenNMS we have a very strong brand with the OpenNMS name, so I think keeping it probably.
Mm-hmm. So just to get some feedback from you guys, when you think about the Horizon version of the product, or the project really, are there any ideas that really jump out at you, like maybe collaborating or contributing? How do you guys interact with the product?
So until actually yesterday, when it was properly mentioned what the differences between Horizon and Meridian were, I had no idea. So it might actually, so something that might be quite useful is to actually specify, obviously in a fairly visual spot. So the front page of the OpenNMS group, say Horizon, the basically current stable, Meridian, long-term support, basically because those terms are obviously well known for throughout the open source community. But actually make sure that it's spelled out in simple
Mm-hmm.
terms in places, and a place someone just goes, oh, right, that makes sense.
Right.
Because, yeah, I saw Meridian, I was like, huh? What's going, where's that? Because obviously you can't find it, because it's the enterprise level
Right.
one. So.
Exactly. Definitely. I think that's a really good idea. He was saying that we should more obviously and simply state the differences between Meridian and Horizon, because a lot of the community is not super sure what in the heck we're doing. So most of you, are you users or contributors? I know 3 people, their roles in this room. So maybe we could go around the room really quick and just say what it is you do.
Just a user,
User? Awesome. Do you use Horizon or Meridian?
Horizon.
Horizon. Antonio, do you use Horizon, Meridian? Do you contribute?
I
Or-
work with the Horizon.
You work with her.
Most of all the file.
Okay, awesome. And you? Horizon? And are you a user or user? User, awesome. Horizon user? An abuser. I think we're all abusers.
Yeah, I contribute with the documentation as well, so
Okay, awesome. We love documentation.
I hate not having documentation. It's cue Ian's rant yesterday.
Awesome. Cool. I don't get to see many of you guys very much, users. 1, I'm brand new, and 2, I'm usually stuck in the office. Oh, what about you? I didn't see you. Horizon? Awesome. Cool. I think I'm actually over time. So thanks very much for contributing. And if you're interested in talking about this more, we can talk afterward. And I really appreciate you coming. Thanks.